In the untamed heart of 1875 Wyoming Territory, fate weaves a dangerous dance between two souls destined to collide. When Thomas Mitchell trades his daughter to settle a debt with the notorious Jake the Snake Henderson, he sets in motion a story that will become legend in the whispered tales of the frontier. What no one expects is the warrior who emerges from the shadows like a ghost at twilight, a man whose mere presence makes hardened outlaws tremble and whose hidden identity is worth a king's ransom to those who hunt him. They call him the Ghost Rider, and for 15 years his heart has been as unyielding as the steel at his hip. But when his eyes meet Sarah Mitchell's in that fateful moment of rescue, both discover that some bonds are stronger than blood and some secrets can heal as deeply as they wound. This isn't just another tale of the Wild West. This is the story of how love blooms in the shadow of danger, and how two hearts find redemption in a land where second chances come at the price of your very soul. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah Mitchell's fingers traced the worn edges of her mother's silver brush, the morning light catching on its tarnished surface. From her bedroom window, she could see the struggling Mitchell ranch stretched out before her, once proud acres, now bearing the weight of neglect and mounting debt. The spring wind carried the scent of sage and prairie grass, along with the bitter reminder that everything she loved was slowly slipping away. "Sarah," her father's voice, rough with last night's whiskey, broke through her reverie. "Get down, here, girl." She tucked the brush into her apron pocket, smoothed her dark hair, and descended the creaking stairs of their ranch house. Thomas Mitchell stood by the kitchen table, his once commanding presence diminished by years of gambling and drink. Yet Sarah couldn't help but search his weathered face for traces of the man who had once carried her on his shoulders and taught her to ride. "The cattle need feeding," he muttered, avoiding her eyes. His hands trembled as he folded a piece of paper and shoved it into his vest pocket. Sarah caught a glimpse of red ink before it disappeared. Another marker, another debt. "I'll tend to them right away," she said, reaching for her worn boots. "And father, Mr. Henderson's men were asking about you in town yesterday. Perhaps we should—" "What I do in town is my business," he snapped, but fear flickered across his face at the mention of Henderson's name. Just see to the cattle." Out in the barn, Sarah worked methodically, finding solace in the familiar routine. At 22, she had become both daughter and ranch hand, trying to hold together the pieces of their crumbling world. The morning sun painted long shadows through the slats of the barn walls, and as she worked, she hummed her mother's favorite hymn, a habit that had earned her the nickname Songbird in town, though few remembered it now. Later that afternoon, while mending a fence line that seemed determined to collapse, Sarah spotted riders approaching from the direction of Black Rock. Her heart sank as she recognized Jake Henderson's distinctive black stallion leading the group. The notorious outlaw had been circling their ranch like a vulture these past months, ever since her father's debts had begun mounting at his establishment in town. Henderson cut an imposing figure as he dismounted, tall and broad-shouldered, with a silver-streaked beard and eyes that reminded Sarah of a rattler's. His reputation for ruthlessness was well-earned, though he masked it behind a veneer of frontier gentility. "Miss Mitchell," he called out, removing his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "Might your father be about?" "He's in town on business," she lied, gripping the fence post tighter. The wood's rough surface grounded her, kept her voice steady. Henderson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "And now that's peculiar, seeing as I just came from there myself." He pulled a folded paper from his vest, similar to the one she'd seen her father hide that morning. "Your father and I have some urgent matters to discuss. Family matters, you might say." The way he emphasized family sent a chill down Sarah's spine. Behind him, his men shifted in their saddles, dark amusement playing across their faces. One of them, a scarred man they called Rattler, spat tobacco juice near her boots. "I'll tell him you called," Sarah said firmly, turning back to her work. But Henderson's next words froze her in place. "You know, a man's daughter is his most precious possession," he drawled, "worth more than gold to some. Your father seems to agree." Sarah's world tilted on its axis as understanding dawned. The red-inked papers, her father's trembling hands, the fear in his eyes, it all crystallized into a horrifying reality. She'd heard whispers of Henderson's other arrangements with desperate families, but never imagined my father would. "Never," she began, but the words died in her throat as Thomas Mitchell himself emerged from the house, shoulders slumped in defeat. "It's done, Jake," he called out, his voice hollow. "The papers are signed." Henderson's smile widened, revealing teeth yellowed by tobacco. "Indeed they are, Thomas. Indeed they are." He turned to his men. "Boys, help Miss Mitchell gather her things. She'll be coming with us now. Payment for her father's unfortunate gambling habits." As two of Henderson's men dismounted and approached, Sarah's hand found her mother's silver brush in her pocket. Its familiar weight anchored her to reality even as her world spun apart. In that moment, she made a silent vow. This would not be her fate. Whatever it took, whatever price she had to pay, she would find a way to escape. What she didn't know, what none of them could have known, was that they were being watched. High on the ridge overlooking the Mitchell ranch, a lone figure sat motionless. On horseback, observing the scene through a spyglass, the Ghost Rider's hand tightened on the weathered brass tube as he witnessed the transaction unfolding below. Within the folds of his duster lay a marshal's badge, its surface deliberately scratched to obscure the name, the first of many secrets that would soon reshape Sarah Mitchell's destiny. Twilight painted the Wyoming sky in shades of amber and rose as Henderson's men escorted Sarah to their camp. Her mother's silver brush pressed against her heart where she'd hidden it inside her bodice, its familiar weight a reminder of better days. The evening breeze carried the scent of sage and wood smoke, mingling with something else, a subtle hint of leather and wilderness that seemed to drift from the shadows beyond the firelight. "You'll learn to appreciate the finer things, Miss Mitchell," Henderson said, gesturing to a silk tent they'd erected. His attempt at refinement made her skin crawl. "I'm not the monster your father's whiskey-loose tongue probably painted me as." Sarah lifted her chin, meeting his serpentine gaze. "A monster with manners is still a monster, Mr. Henderson." A flash of something, admiration perhaps, crossed his face before darkness claimed it again. "Spirit like that fetches a high price in certain territories. Your father knew what he was trading." As they led her toward the tent, Sarah caught movement in the deepening dusk, a shadow that seemed more purposeful than the others. For a moment, just a heartbeat, she glimpsed a figure on horseback, silhouetted against the dying sun. Their eyes met across the distance, and something electric passed between them. The stranger wore a dark duster that rippled in the wind like a crow's wings, and at his throat a carved wooden locket caught the last rays of sunlight. The symbol etched into its surface seemed to pulse with an inner fire, half cavalry insignia, half something older, more mysterious. But when she blinked, he was gone, leaving her wondering if desperation had conjured him from her prayers. Inside the tent, Sarah's fingers worked quickly at the ropes binding her wrists, using a shard of her mother's brush she'd managed to break off. Her heart thundered against her ribs, keeping time with the approaching hoofbeats of Henderson's night patrol. She knew she had precious little time before. A commotion erupted outside, men shouting, horses screaming, the distinctive sound of steel leaving leather, then a voice that made every hair on her neck rise, low, commanding, with an edge that could cut through darkness itself. "Let her go, Henderson. Some debts can't be paid in blood." Sarah pressed herself against the tense canvas, every nerve alive with anticipation. Through the thin material, shadows danced like fever dreams, one of them tall, broad-shouldered, moving with lethal grace. Ghost Rider. Henderson's voice carried a tremor he couldn't quite mask. This doesn't concern you. Everything concerns me when a man sells his own blood. The stranger's voice held something that made Sarah's breath catch, not just authority, but a deep well of emotion carefully contained. What happened next unfolded like lightning. The tent canvas split, and a strong hand found hers in the darkness. Sarah looked up into eyes that burned with an inner fire, eyes that had seen too much, yet somehow held gentleness when they met hers. The Ghost Rider stood before her, solid as mountain stone, yet fluid as winter wind. His face remained shadowed by his hat brim, but she caught the glint of that wooden locket at his throat, its mysterious symbol seeming to pulse between them. "Trust me," he whispered, and his voice stirred something deep in her soul, recognition perhaps of a kindred spirit who knew what it meant to carry wounds that never quite healed. Outside, Henderson's men were regrouping, their shouts carrying promises of violence. The Ghost Rider's hand tightened on hers, calloused palm pressed against her softer one. In that touch lay volumes, protection, determination, and something else, something that made her heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. Why? She managed to ask as he led her toward where his horse waited in the shadows. He paused, turning back to her. Firelight caught the edge of his jaw, revealing a scar that spoke of battles hard won. "Because some things are worth fighting for," he said softly, and in those words lay the first seeds of a truth that would change both their lives forever. As he helped her mount, his hands strong yet gentle at her waist, Sarah caught another glimpse of the locket's symbol, a bridge between two worlds, much like the man himself. What she didn't know then was that this mysterious warrior carried secrets as deep as the night itself, secrets that would test not just their growing trust, but the very nature of love itself. The night wrapped around them like a velvet cloak, as the Ghost Rider's stallion carried them through shadow-draped canyons. Sarah found herself acutely aware of her rescuer's presence behind her, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the strength in the arms that reached around her to hold the reins, the subtle scent of leather and gun smoke that clung to his duster. "They'll follow," she whispered, though the words seemed to be swallowed by the darkness. "Let them." His voice rumbled close to her ear, sending an involuntary shiver down her spine. "The night has always been my ally." A distinctive knife gleamed at his hip, its handle an intricate blend of cavalry craftsmanship and Native American artistry. Like its owner, it seemed to exist between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. Behind them, shouts and gunfire erupted from Henderson's camp. The Ghost Rider guided his horse off the trail with the lightest touch of his knees, demonstrating a connection between man and beast that spoke of years of trust. "Hold tight," he murmured, and Sarah felt his arm strengthen around her waist as they descended a treacherous slope. The intimacy of their position wasn't lost on her, nor was the way his breath caught slightly when she leaned back against his chest for balance. They emerged into a moonlit clearing where the horse's hooves fell silent on soft grass. Here the Ghost Rider drew them to a halt, his body tensing as he listened to the night. Sarah found herself holding her breath, caught in the spell of his vigilance. "Why did you come for me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The pause before his answer seemed heavy with unspoken truths. "There are some wrongs that can't go unanswered." His words carried the weight of personal experience, of old wounds still raw beneath the surface. A branch snapped in the distance, and his hand instantly went to the mysterious knife. The blade caught the moonlight as he drew it, revealing strange markings etched into the steel, symbols that matched those on his wooden locket. "We need to move," he said, but there was reluctance in his voice, as if he too felt the strange peace of this moment, suspended in time. Sarah turned slightly in the saddle, trying to glimpse his face beneath the shadow of his hat. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and she saw something there that made her heart stumble, a loneliness that matched her own, a yearning for something beyond the endless rhythm of survival. Then the moment broke as Henderson's men's shouts drew closer. The ghost rider urged his horse forward, but his hold on her remained gentle despite their speed. As they rode into the deeper darkness of the forest, Sarah realized that for the first time since her mother's death, she felt safe. Not just protected, but truly safe, as if she'd found a harbor in the storm of her life. What she couldn't know was how her presence affected him, how the trust in her touch was beginning to crack the walls he'd built around his heart, threatening to expose the secret that could destroy them both. Dawn's first light caught the dew-laden grass as the ghost rider led them into a hidden valley. Sarah's muscles ached from the night's ride, but she barely noticed the discomfort, too aware of the warmth of his body behind her, the way his breath stirred her hair when he leaned close to warn of low branches. The peaceful moment shattered as gunfire exploded from the ridge above. The ghost rider's reaction was instantaneous. He pulled Sarah from the saddle, shielding her with his body as they rolled behind a fallen log. The motion brought them face to face, and for a heartbeat, time seemed to stop. This close, she could see the scar that traced his jaw, the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, and something else, a shadow of recognition that made him quickly look away. "Stay down," he commanded, drawing his pistol with fluid grace. But Sarah had already spotted the worn cavalry journal that had fallen from his duster during their tumble. It lay open, revealing a page filled with precise military handwriting and a sketched map of Indian territories. Before he could stop her, she grabbed it. "You're not just a wandering vigilante," she breathed, scanning the words. "You were—" "That's not important now," he cut her off, but his voice carried an edge of something like pain. More shots rang out, closer this time. "What's important is getting you to safety." He moved like liquid shadow, returning fire with deadly accuracy. Sarah watched in amazement as he took down two of Henderson's men with non-lethal shots, his skill speaking of years of formal training. The way he handled his weapon, the tactical precision of his movements, it all spoke of military discipline. Yet there was something else in his style, something that whispered of time spent among the tribes. "Behind you!" Sarah's warning came just in time. The ghost rider spun, his mysterious knife flashing in the morning light as he deflected a blow from Rattler, who'd managed to circle behind them. The two men grappled, and Sarah saw her chance. Grabbing a fallen branch, she swung it with all her strength at Rattler's knee. The outlaw crashed down with a howl of pain. The ghost rider's eyes met hers with newfound respect and something warmer that made her breath catch. But the moment broke as more of Henderson's men appeared through the trees. "This way," he said, uncatching her hand. His touch sent electricity through her veins as he pulled her toward a narrow trail that wound up the valley wall. They ran together, his strength supporting her when she stumbled, her quick warning saving him from a sniper's shot. They moved as one, as if they'd been fighting together for years instead of hours. At the top of the ridge, they found his horse waiting, loyal as a shadow. As he helped her mount, Sarah noticed a fresh wound on his arm, where a bullet had grazed him. Without thinking, she touched the torn fabric of his sleeve. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," he said, but his voice softened at her concern. Then his expression changed, spotting something over her shoulder. "Down!" He yanked her from the saddle as a bullet whizzed past. They landed hard, rolling into the shelter of a rock outcropping. This time, when he covered her body with his, there was no pretense of professional distance. His heart thundered against hers, his breath warm on her cheek, and for a moment, neither moved. "I need to tell you something," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion and exertion. But before he could continue, a familiar voice cut through the morning air. "Well, ain't this touching?" Henderson's drawl carried up from below. "Ghost Rider, you're making this personal, and trust me, you don't want me taking this personal." Sarah felt her protector tense, saw something dark and haunted flash across his face. Whatever secret he carried, whatever past he was running from, it was somehow tied to the man below. And as she caught another glimpse of the Cavalry Journal's pages, with their mysterious references to a classified mission gone wrong, she realized that her rescue might have been more than just a chance encounter. The hidden cave offered sanctuary, as twilight painted the desert in shades of purple and gold. Sarah watched as the ghost rider tended his horse with practiced care, his movements betraying the exhaustion he tried to hide. The wound on his arm had begun bleeding again, though he'd said nothing about it. "Let me help you with that," she said softly, approaching with strips torn from her petticoat. When he started to protest, she added, "You've done enough protecting. For one day, allow me this." After a moment's hesitation, he nodded, shrugging off his duster. As she cleaned the wound, her fingers trembled at the discovery of other scars beneath his torn shirt, some from bullets, others from blades, and a few that looked like ritual markings she'd seen on native warriors. "You've lived quite a life," she murmured, not quite a question. He watched her work, his eyes holding shadows deeper than the gathering dusk. "Several lives, none of them quite my own." From his saddlebag, he withdrew a medicine pouch, an unusual blend of military canvas and tribal beadwork. Inside were healing herbs she recognized from her mother's garden, alongside army-issue medical supplies. The combination struck her as perfectly him, a man caught between worlds. "The Cavalry Journal I saw," she ventured, applying a poultice, "to his wound. You were more than just a soldier, weren't you?" "Being a soldier was the simplest part." His voice carried the weight of unspoken memories. "It's what came after that." He trailed off, his hand unconsciously touching the wooden locket at his throat. Sarah finished bandaging his arm, but didn't step away. The closeness felt right somehow, as if they'd known each other in some other life. "Whatever you're running from, whatever Henderson knows, it's not just Henderson." He caught her hand as she withdrew it from his arm, his touch gentle but insistent. "There are forces at work here, bigger than a frontier outlaw's greed. The less you know about my past, the safer you'll be." "I'm already in danger," she reminded him, daring to meet his gaze. "And I'm stronger than I look." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I noticed. That was some quick thinking with the branch. Back there, my mother always said a lady should be full of surprises." The mention of her mother brought a familiar ache, but for the first time the pain was tempered by something else. A warmth kindled by the way he looked at her now, as if truly seeing her. They shared a simple meal of jerky and hard bread, the cave growing darker around them. The ghost rider kept his rifle close, but his posture had softened slightly. When Sarah shivered in the desert night air, he wordlessly offered his duster. The leather carried his warmth and scent, wrapping her in a cocoon of unexpected comfort. "Why did you really come for me?" she asked again, needing to understand. The truth this time. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I saw something in your father's eyes that day in town. The same desperate look my own father wore before. He made a choice that destroyed our family. Some patterns need to be broken. And Henderson, what pattern does he represent?" The ghost rider's hand went to the wooden locket again, a seemingly unconscious gesture. "A debt that can never be repaid, a truth that could start a war if it came." "To light." He met her eyes across the dying embers of their small fire. "Sarah, if you knew who I really was, what I've done—" "I know who you are now," she interrupted, surprising them both with her certainty. "The man who risks his life for strangers, the warrior who shows mercy even to enemies. The rest is just details." Something shifted in his expression then, a crack in the careful walls he'd built. He reached for the locket as if to open it, to show her what lay hidden inside. But a distant horse's whinny froze them both. "Henderson's men," he whispered, instantly alert. "They're closer than I thought." Sarah stood, reluctantly shrugging off his duster. "Then we should move." He caught her arm as she turned to gather their few supplies. "Sarah, Her name on his lips sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cold. "What I was trying to tell you earlier about who I am. Tell me when we're safe," she said, surprising herself by reaching up to touch his scarred cheek. "Some truths are worth waiting for." The look he gave her then would stay with her forever, a mix of wonder, longing, and a fear that spoke not of physical danger, but of the risk of losing something precious just when it had been found. Dawn painted the canyon walls blood red as the Ghost Rider studied a worn map spread across a sun-bleached boulder. The parchment showed military outposts and Indian territories, but it was the careful annotations in the margins that held Sarah's attention. Notes about secret paths and safe havens, written in both military code and tribal symbols. "Henderson's men are here and here," he said, pointing to 2 passes. "They're trying to funnel us toward Fort Larson." His jaw tightened. "Where a garrison of cavalry waits." "The fort is a trap?" Sarah moved closer, her shoulder brushing his. She felt him tense at the contact, then deliberately relax. "For me, yes." His voice carried a weight of history. "Henderson's no common outlaw. He has connections in the army, friends in high places who'd love to see the Ghost Rider unmasked." A horse's distant whinny made them both freeze. The Ghost Rider rolled the map swiftly, but not before Sarah glimpsed a name partially burned away. At the bottom, a military title followed by what looked like Orc. "We need to move," he said, but Sarah caught his arm. "Wait." She met his gaze steadily. "If we're in this together, I need to know what we're running from. The real enemy." Something shifted in his eyes. Respect, and perhaps something deeper. "The real enemy is—" Gunfire exploded around them. The Ghost Rider moved with liquid grace, pulling Sarah behind a rock formation as bullets chipped stone. His body pressed against hers, protective yet achingly intimate in the confined space. "6 riders," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. "2 from the north. 4 circling east." Sarah's mind raced. "The stream we crossed yesterday, if we double back, they'll expect that." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, "but not what we're about to do." He withdrew his mysterious knife, the one with mixed cavalry and tribal markings. "Do you trust me?" "Yes." The word came without hesitation, surprising. Them both with its certainty. He showed her how to use the knife's polished surface as a mirror, checking enemy positions. Together, they crafted a plan that relied as much on her knowledge of local terrain as his tactical expertise. When their eyes met in silent communication, something electric passed between them. "Ready?" he asked softly. Sarah nodded, her heart racing from more than just danger. They moved as one, her distracting the riders with carefully thrown stones, while he circled behind. She heard the swift, efficient sounds of combat, the Ghost Rider's expertise evident in how he disabled rather than killed, each move calculated to incapacitate. A shot rang out too close. Sarah spun to find Rattler, Henderson's scarred lieutenant, aiming at the Ghost Rider's exposed back. Without thinking, she grabbed her mother's silver brush from her bodice and threw it, the heavy silver striking Rattler's hand. His shot went wide. The Ghost Rider turned at the sound, and for a split second, their eyes locked. In that moment, Sarah saw something flash across his face, not just gratitude, but a deep, almost painful recognition, as if he'd found something he'd thought lost forever. Later, as they rode double through terrain too rough for pursuit, Sarah felt the change. Between them, his arms around her carried a new certainty. His body curved protectively, yet possessively against her back. The wooden locket at his throat pressed between her shoulder blades, its mysterious symbols a reminder of all that remained unspoken. "That was quick thinking with the brush," he said finally, his voice rough with something more than exhaustion. "It was my mother's." Sarah's throat tightened. "The last thing she gave me before—" His arms tightened briefly, understanding in the gesture. "Sometimes the things we lose shape us more than the things we keep. Is that what happened to you?" she dared to ask. "Is that why you became the Ghost Rider?" The silence stretched, broken only by their horses' steady gait. Finally he spoke, his voice so low she almost missed it. "I became the Ghost Rider because I lost everything. My family, my honor, my very name. But today—" He paused, and she felt the weight of unsaid words. "Today, I'm beginning to wonder if some things can be found again." The hope in his voice made her heart ache. Sarah covered his hand where it held the reins, feeling the scars that marked his knuckles. Behind them, the sun sank toward the horizon, but ahead the path seemed somehow brighter than before. The abandoned trapper's cabin offered shelter from the gathering storm. Sarah stoked the small fire she'd built, while the Ghost Rider secured the perimeter, his movements betraying the injury he'd sustained during their escape. When he finally returned, rain-soaked and grimacing, she was ready with the medicine pouch and fresh bandages. "Your wounds reopened," she said softly. "Let me help." This time he didn't protest. As he shed his wet duster and shirt, Sarah's breath caught. In the firelight, his torso told a story of survival, surgical scars from military doctors, ritual markings from tribal healers, and something else that made her heart stop. A set of damaged dog tags hung from a leather cord alongside the wooden locket. "You're wondering about these." His voice was quiet as her fingers traced a tribal marking that curved around his ribs. "Each one has a story," she murmured, dabbing at a fresh cut with a cloth. "Like the chapters of a book written in scars. Some stories are better left untold." But he made no move to stop her when she reached for the dog tags, their surface deliberately scratched to obscure the name. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating his face. For the first time, Sarah saw him clearly, not just the warrior, but the man beneath the legend. His features held a nobility that spoke of good breeding, at odds with the hardness life had carved there. But it was his eyes that caught her, deep wells of pain and honor, loss and longing. "When I was young," she found herself saying, "my mother used to tell me that scars were proof of survival, that each one was a story of strength." Your mother sounds wise. His hand covered hers where it rested above his heart. "She died protecting me." Sarah's voice wavered. "There was a raid on our first ranch. She hid me in the root cellar. I heard—" She broke off as his arms encircled her, drawing her close. "I know," he whispered against her hair. "I know what it is to hear and be unable to help, to survive when others don't." The embrace was comfort and confession both. Sarah felt the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his skin. When she lifted her face, their lips were inches apart, the air between them charged with possibility. "Who were you?" she whispered. "Before you became the Ghost Rider?" Pain flickered across his features. He reached for the wooden locket, fingers working its hidden catch. Inside lay a small piece of paper, worn and creased. "I was—" A branch snapped outside. They sprang apart as he doused the fire in one swift movement. In the sudden darkness, Sarah felt his hand find hers, guiding her to a defensive position. The dog tags clinked softly against the locket. Two identities in constant conflict, like the man himself. "We're not alone," he breathed, and in his voice she heard the warrior returning, pushing away the moment of vulnerability they'd shared. But his thumb brushed across her knuckles once, softly, before he released her hand to draw his weapon. Sarah touched the spot where his dog tags had pressed against her palm, wondering what name had been scratched away, and why that name was worth killing for. Sunset painted Thunder Creek Trading Post in shades of amber as Sarah and the Ghost Rider approached. The weathered building squatted between two hills like a watchful old timer, smoke curling from its chimney into the evening sky. A wanted poster fluttered on its wall, the face deliberately burned away, a common sight wherever the Ghost Riders. Legend had spread. "Stay close," he murmured, helping her down from the horse. His hand lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Marcus Webb runs this post. He's not a friend, but he's not an enemy either. You trust him." Sarah adjusted her borrowed shawl, conscious of how she must look after days on the trail. "I trust his greed. Gold speaks louder than loyalty out here." Yet his hand strayed to his mysterious knife, a gesture Sarah had learned meant he was uneasy. The trading post's interior smelled of tobacco, leather, and wood smoke. A bear of a man, with a silver-streaked beard, looked up from his ledger as they entered. His eyes widened slightly at the Ghost Rider's distinctive presence, then narrowed at Sarah. "Well now," Marcus drawled, "ain't this interesting? Don't often see the Shadow Man in such pleasant company." "We need supplies," the Ghost Rider said flatly. "And information." Marcus's gaze lingered on Sarah. "Information's dear these days, especially with Henderson's men passing through yesterday asking questions about a missing lady of quality." Sarah felt the Ghost Rider tense beside her. Before he could respond, she stepped forward. "Then you'll be interested to know that Henderson's been working with renegade cavalry officers, the kind of information that might concern people who prefer their business private." Marcus's expression shifted. He glanced at the Ghost Rider with new speculation. "That's so? Well then, might be we can help each other." He reached under the counter and withdrew a worn envelope. "Message came for you. Well, not you exactly, but for someone you used to be." The Ghost Rider's hand tightened on Sarah's arm. "Who delivered it?" "Army courier, young lieutenant, clean-cut type. Asked about." The door burst open. A group of traders entered, trail dusty and loud. Sarah's heart nearly stopped when she recognized one of them, Bill Hawkins, a regular at Henderson's saloon. The Ghost Rider smoothly turned her away from the door, shielding her with his body while appearing to examine goods on a shelf. "Careful now," he breathed against her ear, his closeness sending shivers down her spine despite the danger. "Hawkins hasn't seen you yet." Sarah nodded, intensely aware of his chest pressed against her back, his breath warming her neck. To anyone watching, they might have appeared to be lovers sharing an intimate moment. The thought made her cheeks flush. "Webb," Hawkins called out. "Any sign of that assassin they're calling Ghost Rider? Word is he kidnapped Thomas Mitchell's daughter." Sarah felt her protector's silent laugh, felt the way his hand at her waist turned protective rather than restrictive. She found herself leaning into him, trust overriding fear. "Can't say I have," Marcus answered smoothly, though his eyes flickered to where they stood. "Though I heard tell he's more hero than assassin. Saved a family from Cheyenne raiders last moon." The conversation shifted to trading prices, but Sarah's focus remained on the man behind her, on the way his body sheltered hers, on the wooden locket pressed between them. When Hawkins and his group finally moved to the back room for drinks, the Ghost Rider led her swiftly toward the door. Marcus caught his arm. "That message, don't you want to know who it's really for, Major?" The title hung in the air like gun smoke. Sarah felt the Ghost Rider's entire body go rigid. When he spoke, his voice carried an edge she'd never heard before. "Some ghosts are better left buried, Marcus." Outside, as they mounted up, Sarah saw something had changed in him. The careful walls were back up, but now she'd glimpsed what lay behind them, not just a man running from his past, but a decorated officer carrying a burden that could destroy them both. "Major?" she asked softly as they rode away. "Not anymore?" His voice was rough with emotion. "That man died a long time ago, along with everyone who served under him." The weight of unspoken tragedy in his words made Sarah's heart ache. She reached back, finding his hand where it held the reins. "But you survived." "Sometimes," he whispered, "surviving is the hardest part of dying." Night had fallen by the time they made camp in a sheltered grove. The Ghost Rider was unusually quiet, his movements tense as he tended to his horse. The revelation at the trading post had shaken something loose in him. Sarah could see it in the way he kept touching the military discharge paper hidden in his coat, as if ensuring it was still there. "You don't have to tell me," she said softly, approaching him. "But I want you to know that whatever it is, whatever happened, it doesn't change who you are to me." He turned to her then, his face half hidden in shadow. "What am I to you, Sarah?" The Susan question hung between them, heavy with possibility. Before she could answer, he withdrew the discharge paper from his coat. The edges were burned, but the military seal was still visible. 5 years ago, I commanded a special unit of the cavalry, he began, his voice low. We were tasked with protecting peace negotiations between the army and the Northern Cheyenne. But someone high in command, wanted those talks to fail. Sarah moved closer, drawn by the raw pain in his voice. What happened? The night before the treaty signing, our camp was attacked, not by warriors, by our own men, dressed as raiders. His hands clenched. I tried to stop it, to expose the truth, but Henderson, he was military intelligence then. He made sure the blame fell on me, called me a traitor, said I'd orchestrated the massacre myself. But you survived, Sarah whispered, reaching for his hand. I survived because the Cheyenne medicine man saw the truth. He took me in, healed me, taught me their ways. His fingers intertwined with hers. I became something new, not fully soldier, not fully warrior, a ghost between worlds. A twig snapped in the darkness. They both tensed, but it was only a deer passing through. When the ghost rider spoke again, his voice had softened. My real name is James Hawkwood, Major James Hawkwood. The admission seemed to cost him physically. But that man died in the massacre. His honor, his future, everything was buried in those ashes. Sarah touched the wooden locket at his throat. This belonged to the medicine man? A reminder of my oath to him, to protect both peoples, to find the men truly responsible. His hand covered hers where it rested on the locket. Henderson recognized me at your father's ranch. That's why he was so quick to make the deal. He knew I couldn't stand by and watch another innocent life destroyed by greed. So saving me wasn't just chance, Sarah said, understanding dawning. At first, no. His other hand came up to cup her cheek. But now, the tenderness in his touch made her breath catch. Now I realize that some ghosts don't want to rest. Some want to live again. His eyes searched hers in the darkness. Sarah, if Henderson exposes me, the army will... She pressed her fingers to his lips, silencing him. Then we'll face it together. I lost everything once too, remember? Sometimes what we find afterward is worth more than what we lost. He drew her closer, until she could feel his heart beating against hers. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. You make me want to be more than a ghost. You already are, she whispered, and lifted her face to his. The kiss, when it came, was gentle at first, a question, an offering. Then Sarah wound her arms around his neck, and it deepened into something more desperate, more real. The wooden locket pressed between them like a promise, its symbols warming against their skin. A distant wolf howled, reminding them of the dangers that still lurked. But as they broke apart, breathing heavily, Sarah saw something new in his eyes. Hope, fragile as dawn, but growing stronger. Dawn's first light caught the glint of rifle barrels in the rocks above. James, for he was truly James to her now, not just the Ghost Rider, spotted them first, his arm tightening around Sarah's waist as they rode. Henderson's men, he murmured against her ear. They've been herding us since the trading post. A distinctive bullet casing lay half-buried in the trail ahead, its surface marked with Henderson's personal insignia, a coiled snake. James reined the horse to a stop, his body tensing against her back. It's a message, Sarah realized. He's telling you he knows. He's telling us he remembers. James's voice carried steel beneath the softness meant only for her. That night at the massacre, Henderson used these special rounds. His signature, his way of claiming the kills. Gunfire erupted from the cliffs, sending their horse rearing. James moved with fluid grace, sweeping Sarah from the saddle and behind a boulder in one smooth motion. The intimacy of their position, her back pressed to his chest, his arms bracketing her body as he returned fire, felt different now, charged with everything left unspoken in last night's kiss. Like old times, eh, Major? Henderson's voice carried. across the canyon. Though last time you had a whole cavalry unit at your back, not just one pretty girl. Sarah felt James stiffen at the taunt. Without thinking, she covered his hand where it gripped his pistol. He's trying to shake you, to make you forget who you are now. Something softened in his eyes as he looked at her. Who I am now, he repeated softly, then called out to Henderson. A man can change, Jake, can learn to see through lies that once blinded him. Noble words from a traitor. More gunfire punctuated Henderson's reply. Tell me, does she know the untold truth about the orders you really gave that night? I know enough, Sarah answered before James could, her voice ringing with conviction. I know a good man when I see one. A bullet struck dangerously close, showering them with stone chips. James pulled Sarah tighter against him, his lips brushing her temple as he whispered, When I move left, you go right. There's a path down to the stream bed. I'm not leaving you. No, he said, and she heard the smile in his voice. You're flanking. Them. Remember what I taught you about using terrain? Understanding dawned. Sarah felt a fierce joy surge through her. He wasn't sending her away. He was trusting her to fight beside him, as equal partners. Just as she turned to tell him so, she caught movement in her peripheral vision. James! Her warning came just in time. Rattler had circled behind them, knife raised. James spun, blocking the blade with his mysterious knife. The one bearing both cavalry and tribal markings. The two men grappled, steel ringing on steel. Sarah didn't hesitate. Grabbing a fallen branch, she swung it at Rattler's knee just as she had days before. But this time, the outlaw was ready. He caught the branch, yanking Sarah off balance. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Sarah stumbled but didn't fall. Instead, she used the momentum to drive her shoulder into Rattler's midsection, just as James had taught her during their quiet evenings practicing defense. The outlaw's breath left him in a rush. His knife clattered to the ground. James finished the fight with a precise strike to Rattler's temple, dropping him unconscious but alive. When he turned to Sarah, his eyes held a mixture of pride and something deeper, more tender. That wasn't in the cavalry manual, he said softly. Good thing. I'm a quick study. Their eyes locked, the heat of battle transmuting into a different kind of fire. A bullet whined between them, breaking the moment. Henderson's voice carried a new edge of desperation. Don't you want to know why I really sent you to that Cheyenne? Camp, Major. What was in those sealed orders you followed so blindly? James went very still. Sarah saw the shadow of old doubts cross his face, but when he spoke, his voice was steady. The past is written in blood, Jake, but the future. His eyes met Sarah's. The future is what we make it. Together, they moved into position for their counterattack, their movements synchronized, as if they'd been fighting side by side for years instead of days. And maybe, Sarah thought as she caught the fierce light in James's eyes, that was the real miracle. Not that two broken people could find each other, but that they could make each other whole. The battle had left its mark on the canyon. As the dust settled, Sarah watched James retrieve a singed letter that had fallen from Henderson's saddlebag during their skirmish. The military command seal was still visible on its weathered surface, marking it as evidence of a past James had tried to bury. You don't have to read it, she said softly, touching his arm. His hand covered hers, drawing strength from the contact. Yes, I do. Whatever's in these orders, I need to know the truth. They made camp in a sheltered hollow, far from the scene of the fight. As James built a small fire, Sarah noticed how his hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what they might discover. When he finally unfolded the letter, she sat close beside him, their shoulders touching. To Major James Hawkwood, he read, his voice rough. Your mission to escort the Cheyenne peace delegation is hereby amended. Intelligence suggests hostile elements among the tribal leaders. You are ordered to... He stopped, the paper crumpling in his grip. James, Sarah covered his clenched fist with her hand. They wanted me to provoke an incident, to give them an excuse to break the peace. His voice cracked, but I refused. I sent word back that I wouldn't betray the trust of people who'd offered peace in good faith. That's when Henderson was sent to ensure compliance. Sarah took the letter gently from his grasp, scanning its contents. This proves your innocence, shows you were set up. At what cost? He touched the wooden locket at his throat. 43 people died that night. Good men from my unit. Cheyenne elders who truly wanted peace. Their blood is still on my hands. Because I didn't see it coming, didn't stop it in time. No. Sarah turned to face him fully, framing his face with her hands. Their blood is on the hands of men like Henderson, men who chose violence over justice. You chose honor, even when it cost you everything. His eyes met hers, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. Not everything, he whispered. Finding you, it's given me something I thought I'd lost forever. What's that? Hope. His hand came up to cover hers where it rested against his cheek. A reason to be more than just a ghost seeking vengeance. The tenderness in his touch made her breath catch. When he kissed her this time, it was different from their first kiss. Slower, deeper, as if he was finally allowing himself to fully feel, to fully live in this moment, rather than in the shadows of his past. But life had taught them both that tender moments don't last. A horse's whinny split the night, followed by Henderson's voice carrying across the darkness. Found something interesting in those orders, Major? There's more where that came from. Enough evidence to expose everyone involved in the massacre. Generals, politicians, Indian agents. Meet me at Dawn Creek tomorrow. Come alone, and I'll give you the whole truth. James tensed, but Sarah felt a new steadiness in him as he drew her closer. He's desperate, she murmured against his chest. Whatever proof he has, he's afraid to face you with it, because he knows I'm not alone anymore. James's arms tightened around her. All these years I've been fighting shadows, but you make me want to step into the light. Sarah lifted her face to his, seeing in his eyes not the Ghost Rider or even Major Hawkwood, but simply the man, scarred but unbroken, strong enough to be vulnerable, brave enough to love again. Then we'll face tomorrow together, she said. No more shadows, no more ghosts. His kiss was her answer, a promise sealed under the stars. But as they held each other, both knew that Dawn Creek would bring either salvation or destruction. The truth, like love, demanded courage to face it head-on. Moonlight silvered the hidden valley as James led Sarah into the Cheyenne camp. Prayer. Flags fluttered in the night breeze, and the scent of sage smoke wrapped around them like a blessing. A ceremonial feather hung from James's wooden locket now, a gift from their messenger, marking him as a friend of the tribe. Many thought white. Hawk dead, said a deep voice in accented English. Running Wolf, the medicine man who had saved James's life, emerged from the shadows. His weathered face held both wisdom and wariness. Now he returns with thunder at his heels, and a woman who walks between two worlds, like himself. Sarah felt James's hand tighten on hers. She's my heart's truth, old friend. The simple declaration made Sarah's pulse quicken. Running Wolf studied her with keen eyes, then nodded slowly. I see it. The same fire that burns in you burns in her. He touched the feather at James's throat. Come, there is much to speak of before dawn brings its judgment. Inside the medicine man's lodge, firelight danced across walls adorned with symbols that matched those on James's wooden locket. Running Wolf settled cross-legged before them, pulling out a small bundle wrapped in elk hide. When White Hawk first came to us, he said, unwrapping the bundle, he was more dead than alive. Not just his body, his spirit walked dark paths. He revealed a pair of cavalry lieutenant's bars, blackened by fire. We healed his flesh, but the true healing came when he learned to blend the warrior's path of his people with the medicine. A ways of ours? You gave me purpose when I had none, James said softly, taught me to be more than my rage. And now? Running Wolf's gaze was penetrating. What purpose drives you to face your old enemy? Sarah felt James straighten beside her. Truth, justice for those who died. Ah, Running Wolf smiled slightly. Those are good words, but I see in your eyes a deeper truth. He looked meaningfully at their joined hands. Sometimes the greatest victory is not in vengeance, but in living well, despite those who wished us harm. Henderson has proof, James began, but Running Wolf held up a hand. Proof of men's evil. We have always known this. He reached into the bundle again and withdrew something that made James catch his breath. A medicine pouch identical to the one he carried, but older, marked with symbols of protection and renewal. What matters is not what was stolen from us, but what we choose to build from the ashes. Sarah found herself speaking, like the prairie after fire, new growth, stronger than before. Running Wolf's eyes crinkled with approval. She understands, White Hawk. The Great Spirit sends us trials not to destroy us, but to teach us how to live again. He handed the medicine pouch to James. This belonged to your brother in the tribe, who fell that night. He would be proud to see you have found your way back to life. James's hands trembled as he accepted the pouch. I don't know if I can be what I once was. No. Running Wolf touched the feather at James's throat. You will be more. A bridge between peoples, like the symbol you wear. And now, his gaze included Sarah, you have someone to build that bridge with. As they left the lodge later, blessed with the tribe's protection and wisdom, Sarah saw tears on James's cheeks in the moonlight. She reached up to brush them away, but he caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. Thank you, he whispered. For what? For helping me remember that some things are worth more than vengeance. He touched the medicine pouch, now hanging alongside his wooden locket. Running Wolf is right. Whatever happens tomorrow at Dawn Creek, the true victory is in choosing life, choosing love. Sarah rose on her tiptoes to kiss him, tasting salt, and sage, and promise. Above them, the prayer flags fluttered like wings, carrying their hopes into the star-strewn night. The first rays of sunlight were just touching Dawn Creek when they spotted the lone rider approaching. Sarah's heart clenched as she recognized her father's stooped form. Thomas Mitchell looked older than when she'd last seen him, grief and guilt etched deep in his face. Sarah, he called out, his voice breaking, thank God you're safe. James's hand found hers, offering silent support. When her father's eyes fell on their joined fingers, something like hope flickered across his weathered features. I've brought proof, Thomas said, withdrawing a bank draft from his coat. The paper trembled in his hands. Of everything. Henderson's, real plans, the men behind him. It's all here. Why? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Why did you really sell me to him? Thomas's shoulders slumped. Because I was a coward. Henderson didn't just want my gambling debts. He wanted information about the Ghost Rider, said he'd heard rumors about someone helping Indians escape the reservations, someone with military training. He looked at James. He thought my daughter might draw you out. Sarah felt James go rigid beside her. I was the target all along. Henderson's been obsessed with finding you since that night at the Cheyenne camp. Thomas withdrew more papers from his coat. He's been working with men in Washington, powerful men who want the truth about the massacre buried forever. But I've got proof of their plans here. He held out the documents with shaking hands. As James stepped forward to take them, shots rang out from the cliffs above. Thomas cried out, red blooming across his chest. Father! Sarah ran to him as he collapsed. James's arms came around them both, pulling them behind the shelter of a boulder as more bullets kicked up dust around them. I'm sorry, Thomas gasped, pressing the papers into Sarah's hands. I'm so sorry, my girl. I never deserved a daughter like you. Shh, she soothed, tears falling as she cradled his head. Save your strength. Major, Thomas gripped James's arm. With surprising strength. Protect her. She's all that matters now. With my life, James promised, his voice rough with emotion. Thomas's eyes found Sarah's one last time. Your mother would be proud of who you've become. stronger than I ever was. His breath hitched. The papers show everything. Henderson's partners in Washington and their plans for the territories. Stay with me, Sarah pleaded, but she could feel him slipping away. Love you, girl. Always did. His voice faded as his eyes drifted closed. Sarah's cry of grief was drowned out by Henderson's voice from above. Touching reunion. Now, about those papers. Hand them over, and I might let you live long enough to see tomorrow's sunrise. James pulled Sarah closer, his body shielding her from both bullets and grief. When she looked up at him through tear-blurred eyes, she saw both tenderness and steel in his gaze. Your father died trying to make things right, he said softly. We'll make sure his sacrifice means something. Sarah clutched the papers to her chest, feeling their weight, not just paper and ink, but lives and truths that could change everything. Her father's last gift, bought with his blood. Together, she whispered, and felt James's arms tighten around her in silent promise. Above them, Henderson's men were moving into position. The truth her father died for might save them or destroy them, but one thing was certain. Dawn Creek would see an ending written in blood and redemption before the day was done. The sun climbed higher over Dawn Creek as Sarah and James examined her father's documents behind their rocky shelter. A military medal tumbled from the papers, the Medal of Honor, its surface scarred and tarnished, the name on its backing making James inhale sharply. This was your commanding officers, Sarah whispered, recognizing the name from James's stories. The one who died trying to stop the massacre, Colonel Reed. James's voice was thick with memory. Henderson claimed he killed himself out of guilt, but these papers... Tell a different story. Henderson's voice cut through the morning air. He appeared on a ledge above them, rifles trained on their position. Amazing what a man will reveal when he's dying, isn't it? Your precious colonel knew too much, just like Mitchell there. Sarah's hand found James's, their fingers intertwining. You murdered them both. Following orders, my dear, just like the good major here used to do. Henderson's smile was cold. Washington has plans for these territories. Can't have bleeding. Hearts like Reed or Ghost Riders stirring up trouble with the tribes. It was never about peace talks, James said, realization dawning. The massacre was just the beginning. Smart boy. Henderson gestured, and his men began moving to surround them. Those papers detail everything. Treaties already signed, giving railroad companies access to tribal lands, mining rights sold before. The ink was dry. The massacre was just a convenient way to end negotiations. Sarah felt James trembling with rage beside her, but his voice remained steady. And you're their attack dog. Better than being their scapegoat, Major. Henderson's eyes glittered. I offered you a place in this once. Still could. Think of the power, the wealth, like what you offered my father. Sarah's voice cut like steel. Look how well that ended. Something dangerous flashed across Henderson's face. Last chance. The papers now, or the arrow that sprouted from the tree beside his head silenced him. On the ridges above, warriors materialized like shadows. Running Wolf's people come to honor their promise to Whitehawk. You're not the only one with friends in high places, James said softly, drawing his knife. What happened next was chaos. Henderson's men opened fire as the Cheyenne warriors descended. James pulled Sarah behind better cover, but she was already moving with purpose, her father's sacrifice giving her strength. The medal, she said, pressing it into James's hands. It proves everything. Reed's death, the real orders. Sarah, his voice stopped her. When she met his eyes, she saw something there that made her heart skip. If we do this, there's no going back. The men behind Henderson won't stop. She silenced him with a kiss, fierce and quick. I lost everything once. Found something better. Her hand covered his, where it held the medal. Whatever comes next, we face it together. The truth hung between them, more powerful than any conspiracy. Love born in darkness, stronger for having faced the light. When James spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Together, he agreed. and she saw the Ghost Rider's shadows finally lift from his eyes, leaving only the man who had chosen love over vengeance, hope over hatred. Above them, Henderson was shouting orders, his careful plans unraveling. But Sarah and James had found something his bullets couldn't touch, something worth more than all the gold in the territories. They had found their way home. The battle at Dawn Creek had reached a stalemate. Behind their rocky shelter, Sarah watched, as James studied the tribal peace pipe Running Wolf had pressed into his hands before the fighting began, its surface carved with symbols of truth and justice, bridging two worlds just as James himself did. "Henderson's right about one thing," James said softly. "These papers, this medal, they could tear apart everything from Washington to the territories." "And save countless lives," Sarah added, touching the wooden locket at his throat. "Give the tribes a chance at real peace." A bullet struck near them, sending stone chips flying. Through the dust, they could see Henderson organizing his remaining men for a final push. The Cheyenne warriors held the high ground, but ammunition was running low on both sides. "If we expose this," James continued, his voice heavy with the weight of choice, "there's no going back, no quiet life, no peace for either of us. We'll have targets on our backs from powerful men." Sarah took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Listen to me, James Hawkwood. I didn't fall in love with a man who chose the easy path. I fell in love with a warrior who fights for what's right, no matter the cost." His breath caught at her declaration. "Say that again." "Which part?" A smile tugged at her lips despite the danger. "That I love you or that you're too honorable for your own good." He answered her with a kiss that tasted of gunsmoke and promise. When they broke apart, his eyes were clear, the last shadows of doubt gone. "Running Wolf told me once that true peace comes not from hiding truth, but from facing it." He lifted the peace pipe, its carvings catching the sunlight. "Maybe it's time to stop being a ghost and start being the man you believe in." "The man I love," she corrected, and saw his eyes soften. A shout from above interrupted them. Henderson's men had started their advance, but now, looking at the evidence in their hands and the love in their hearts, the choice was clear. James picked up his mysterious knife, the one that had marked his journey between worlds. "Together?" Sarah nodded, feeling stronger than she ever had. Together, they had the truth. They had each other, and they had warriors at their backs who understood that some fights were worth any cost. As they prepared to meet Henderson's charge, Sarah saw in James's eyes not the Ghost Rider of legend, but something far more powerful. A man who had finally found something worth living for. A new badge glinted in the morning sun. James's original cavalry insignia, restored by Running Wolf's people, now bearing both military and tribal markings. As Henderson and his men charged their position, James touched it once, a reminder of who he had become. "Quite a pair we make," Sarah said, checking the rifle James had taught her to use. "A disgraced major and a rancher's daughter. A warrior. And his heart," he corrected softly, then called out to Henderson, "It's over, Jake. The papers are already on their way to newspapers in 3 territories. Henderson's laugh carried across the battlefield. "You always were naive, Hawkwood. You think papers and medals can stop what's coming, the railroads, the mines. Progress doesn't wait for peace talks." "No," James answered, his voice ringing with authority. "But justice does." The fight exploded. In earnest, Henderson's men charged from multiple directions, but the Cheyenne warriors met them with disciplined precision, showing what James had taught them of military tactics. Sarah and James moved as one, covering each other with an efficiency born of trust and love. "Just like at the trading post," Sarah called over the gunfire, dropping a man trying to flank them. James's smile was fierce with pride. "You're a better shot than I was at the academy." A bullet struck near his head, and Sarah saw Henderson himself approaching, using his men's attack as cover. The look in his eyes wasn't just hatred, it was fear. Fear of exposure, of losing power, of facing what he'd become. "You know what's funny, Major?" Henderson called out, closer now. "I actually believed in the cause once. Law, order, civilization. Then I learned what those words really meant to the men in power." "So you became what you hated," James replied, his voice carrying. "Traded your honor for blood money." "Honor?" Henderson's laugh was bitter. "Ask your Cheyenne friends what honor got them. Ask Sarah's father what principles are worth in this new world." Sarah felt rage surge through her at the mention of her father. Before James could stop her, she stepped out from cover, rifle raised. "My father died trying to make things right. What will you die for, Henderson? Railroad contracts? Mining rights?" Something flickered in Henderson's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, of what he'd lost. For a moment, the battlefield seemed to hold its breath. Then everything happened at once. Henderson raised his gun with snake-like speed, but Sarah was faster. Her shot struck his shoulder as James tackled her clear of the return. "Fire!" They rolled together behind a boulder, James's body covering hers protectively, even as his eyes showed nothing but trust in her abilities. "Nice shot," he murmured against her hair. "I had a good teacher," she answered, then pushed him left as she went right. Their movements synchronized by days of fighting together, they emerged on either side of Henderson, who knelt clutching his shoulder. His remaining men were engaged with the Cheyenne warriors, leaving their leader exposed. When he looked up at them, his face showed not defeat, but a strange sort of acceptance. "You really love her, don't you, Hawkwood?" Blood stained his jacket. Where Sarah's bullet had struck, would have thought the Ghost Rider's heart died in that massacre. "That's where you're wrong, Jake." James's voice was quiet. "A ghost can't love. Only a man can do that. Only a man can choose justice over vengeance." "Justice?" Henderson spat. "There's a bullet in my back that says different." "No." Sarah stepped forward, her rifle steady. "That bullet says a woman can choose to fight for what's right, just like my father finally did." As if her words were a signal, Running Wolf's warriors emerged from their positions, surrounding Henderson. The battle was over. In the sudden quiet, James reached for Sarah's hand, their fingers intertwining as naturally as breathing. "What now, Major?" Henderson asked, looking older suddenly, more human. "A trial, public exposure." James touched his new badge, symbolizing both his past and his future. "Now we make sure the truth isn't buried this time. For everyone who died at that camp, for Sarah's father, for all the people whose lives were traded like cattle." "Together," Sarah added, and felt James's hand tighten on hers in silent confirmation. The sun had fully risen over Dawn Creek, casting long shadows behind them, but illuminating the path ahead with crystal clarity. They had chosen their road, not the easy one, but the right one, and they would walk it side by side. 3 days after the battle at Dawn Creek, Sarah stood beside James on a hill overlooking the Mitchell Ranch. A new symbol hung between them, her mother's silver brush and his wooden locket now joined together, on a single leather cord, marking their shared path forward. "The newspapers are running the story," James said softly, his arm around her waist. "Henderson's testimony and your father's documents have already reached Washington. Change is coming, and with it, danger." Sarah leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "Are you ready for that?" His laugh rumbled in his chest. "A ghost afraid of threats? Besides," he turned her to face him, his eyes full of tenderness, "I have something worth fighting for now." The ranch below showed signs of renewal. Running Wolf's people had helped repair the fences, their presence a living testament to the bridge James had built between worlds. The peace pipe now hung above the ranch house door, a symbol of the sanctuary they would build here, a place where truth and justice could take root. "You know," Sarah said, touching the joined symbols at his throat, "my mother used to say that love was like her silver brush, something that needed daily tending to keep its shine. And what do you say?" His hand covered hers where it rested. Above his heart, I say love is like your locket, strong enough to survive fire, precious enough to protect, and full of mysteries still waiting to be shared. James's eyes softened as he drew her closer. Then we'll tend it daily and protect it fiercely. His forehead touched hers. No more ghosts, no more shadows, just us, facing whatever comes together. Together, she agreed, rising on her tiptoes to kiss him. Below them, the setting sun painted the prairie in shades of promise. They had chosen a harder path, becoming guardians of truth in a land still wrestling with justice. But they had also chosen love. Not the easy kind that wilts in darkness, but the kind that burns brighter for having faced the storm. And in the end, that made all the difference.